that Bhakti movement had its genesis in South India in the 6th century, based on teachings of Alvar Sants, and it is characterized by the writings of the poet saints hailing from different castes and communities, many of whom were female, that extolled passionate devotional love for the divine. I would not like to tell this audience, because I know you will understand, that India is a unique country in the sense that it has been able to preserve the wisdom of its sages and saints, which they delivered in a state of enlightened consciousness. And we have termed that as Smriti, tradition. And the Vedas and the Upanishads and even the Bhagavad Gita, many people hold, is a part of that great tradition. And then came the Shruti administration, Shruti Parampara, which meant that the Guru, people like Vishwanath Tripathi and others, and all of you, who have decided to burning your flame of energy for dissemination of knowledge, which this conference represents, have decided to burn themselves all the time to give light. So this was the great Guru Shruti Parampara. And I hope that this conference puts it clearly that this was also a part of the Bhakti movement. Otherwise, Bhakti movement in pre-printing era, in pre-radio, television and recording era wouldn't have moved from one part to the other. And two great works which have persisted are Ramayana and Mahabharata. I am mentioning this to you not as books. When I was posted to Assam I went there in 1965, I found to my surprise that those two books are not available except in libraries. But Ramayana Mahabharata tradition was a living part in every home. The homes had Bhagavad, one of the Puranas, reinterpreted by the genius of Sankardev and Madhavdev in the 15th century. But that tradition, and now people have seen how that tradition and also that book traveled to the south, and Kamban wrote his Ramayana based on Valmiki's Ramayana. So this is something that is happening when a tradition moves faster than a book, and that was that period. A musical composition, a devotional song moved faster and energized the people to think outside their caste, outside their religion, and to build a fraternity. And at times there was no difference between men and women, high caste and the Dalits. I am aware of the complexity of the Indian tradition, and I have written that in my book Bahudha and the Post 9/11 World, And I was surprised to know from my publishers that one of the chapters of that book, the Oxford tells me, which is a part of Oxford scholarship program, called the Vedic Worldview, is sailing all over Western countries, and particularly in the United States, where this has been prescribed for the students to be one of the leading materials. Friends, there are various interpretations of this Bhakti movement. And I would refer to two, which sums up this entire debate on which you have prepared the concept paper and you have organized the conference. One was articulated by Professor Venkataraman, Professor of Sanskrit, University of Madras. He is no more. He passed away in 1979. And he delivered Sardar Patel Memorial Lecture. I had the privilege of doing that. He did it in 1964. I had the privilege of doing that 45 years later, in 1999. So I was aware of his lecture. And then I looked at it the other day for your conference. And he held the view that the Bhakti movement integrated India. And the title of his lecture was The Great Integrators, the Saint Singers of India. It is very relevant for this conference. And he said that the protest was not only against the rigidities of caste structure among the Hindus, the untouchability among the Hindus, the denial of rights to the women among the Brahminical order, but also among the Buddhists and Jains, because they had moved on to rituals. And he goes on to talk of Gujarat, Kashmir, Punjab, and other parts of India, and refers to Vaishnava poets whose names you are all well familiar with. But there is now another book, which you may not be aware, but this was published only last year. This is by another professor professor of religion of Columbia University, Bernard College, Columbia University. He is John Stratton Howley. John Stratton Howley, Hawley. He has written a book called A Storm of Songs, India and the Idea of the Bhakti Movement. Harvard University Press had published it last year. According to John Stratton Howley, that India celebrates itself as a nation of unity in diversity, but where does the sense of unity come from? And he thinks Bhakti movement, where poets sang Bhakti from India's southernmost tip to the northern Himalayan heights, provided the religious bedrock upon which the modern state of India could claim to be built on. He clarifies that it will be not a good thing, because the modern idea of movement is secular in character. And what we are trying to do is to search for nationhood in a Bhakti movement. He goes on to say, to read it as a movement or agitation, I am quoting here, that keeping a modern concept of override differences between Hindus and Muslims or between any two social groups is mere imagination. Bhakti, a more personal, ecstatic experience, brought some cosmetic changes and reforms on a social level, but always remains a personal sadhana than a movement or andolan to bring radical social change in Indian society. He accepts that nobody can deny that there are congregational aspects in many events in Hinduism. But he goes on to say that we are taking it too far. My own interpretation is somewhat different of the Bhakti movement. And I will conclude with that. But how I arrive at, I will give you some glimpses. And something I told you, and I said about the Ramayana and Mahabharata tradition that went to Kamrup, now known as Assam, and integrated the society, provided a bridge between the tribes, the enemist tribes, and the caste Hindus. Hindus were there much before. In Kamrup. It went on, and as I said earlier, that became a part of social movement, because Assam had temples, Assam had the Varna system, Assam had the tribes, 200 tribes. And Assam had the story of Ramayana and Mahabharata. So when I was Deputy Commissioner at Tejpur, it is the land of Rukmini. I had the hills dedicated to Rukmini. So it was Krishna. When I traveled down to Vishwanath, it is a place where Lord Shiva sat, and 100,000 of his shilas were met on those banks of Brahmaputra. When I looked deeper into Brahmaputra's name itself, they said this is Burma's son. So other rivers are known as mothers or sisters. Brahmaputra is known as a son. It's a male figure. That kind of thing. But these are the beliefs which have inspired the Bhakti movement. And these are the beliefs which have been reinforced in the minds of the people by the Bhakti movement. Many people here may not be knowing that the political changes in Kamrup took place from Hindu order. In 1228, tribal rule came, known as the Huns. And they came from Thailand. A warrior group came, a small group. You know what they did? They decided to marry locally. And they decided that no more Thais or Shan tribe they belong to will come here. And they ruled for 600 years, till 1826. the kings, a home king, he believed in Burangi's history. So he wanted somebody to record the history, whatever he says, whatever he does. So the Burangi Parampara started, and people from Mithila who were educated, Kastas, they went. And one of them was asked to teach. And he brought a Maithil wife from Mithila. He got a son, and then the going was tough. Travels outside it was tough, entry was tough because of the rivers and the nature of the terrain. That fellow married an Assamese girl, the second generation. And the boy was born, and that became Shankardev. And it was Shankardev who set up satras. You must be seeing that in newspapers. And namhas, a chain of namhas. Satra was the prayer where no deity was prayed. And in doing this, I found that he had people from different communities. In his own satra, which is in Barpeta, he had friends and performers. Chandu Sai was a Muslim, Govinda was a Garo, tribal, Jain Hari a Bhutia, Sri Ram a Kavivartak, and Madhav a potter. And the Nam Kirtan, the tallest person with good voice,